The storm swallowed the English sky as lightning clawed above the ancient castle. Somewhere inside the darkness, a queen could not sleep. Candles trembled through the endless palace hallway, their weak flames dancing like frightened souls against the stone walls. Queen Elizabeth sat alone upon her golden throne, fear hiding behind royal elegance while shadows surrounded her like silent enemies. Her eyes searched the darkness nervously, as if she already knew betrayal was waiting somewhere nearby. Thunder exploded outside the palace windows, and the violent wind pushed the curtains like invisible ghosts entering the room. Deep inside the corridor, distant footsteps echoed slowly. No servant dared walk there after midnight. Elizabeth stood silently beside the giant rain-covered window, her silhouette swallowed by darkness and lightning. A lonely crown rested beside a dying candle, shining like a curse instead of a symbol of power. Smoke drifted across the throne room, while secret political whispers poisoned the air of the palace. Outside, thick fog surrounded the royal castle, making England itself feel haunted by unseen danger. The young Queen Elizabeth looked beautiful yet emotionally distant, as though happiness had already abandoned her long ago. The massive palace gate slowly opened at midnight, revealing shadows creeping into royal history. Elizabeth's hand tightened around the throne, holding power the same way drowning people hold breath. Beside a candle, the map of England burned slowly, warning that chaos was coming for the kingdom. Inside the giant cathedral hall, Elizabeth stood completely alone beneath towering ceilings and cold silence. Candle wax dripped across ancient royal documents while dangerous secrets waited between the pages. On the palace wall, the shadow of the crown appeared larger than Elizabeth herself, as if power controlled its owner. The royal bedroom glowed red beneath candlelight, hiding fear beneath velvet curtains and silence. The throne room sat empty after midnight, but it somehow felt like unseen eyes were still watching. Elizabeth stared into the mirror, hiding emotions even from her own reflection. Years earlier, baby Elizabeth entered the world beneath warm candlelight inside a luxurious Tudor chamber. King Henry VIII heard the child was a girl, and disappointment darkened his face immediately. Royal servants stood silently around the chamber, too afraid to speak during the king's cold silence. Wrapped in royal cloth, the newborn Elizabeth looked innocent, unaware of the storms awaiting her future. Anne Boleyn held her daughter lovingly beside the palace window, hoping destiny would protect the child. Henry VIII sat on his throne like a mountain of anger and pride, already craving a male heir. Inside the grand banquet hall, nobles smiled politely while secretly plotting against one another. Anne Boleyn walked through the corridors as whispers followed her like poisonous snakes. In a candlelit chamber, powerful men gathered secretly to decide Anne's terrifying fate. Royal advisors leaned over the wooden table discussing execution as though it were politics instead of murder. The night before her death, Anne Boleyn cried beside a candle while darkness consumed the room. At midnight, guards carrying torches marched through the Tower of London like messengers of doom. Anne Boleyn knelt before execution with trembling dignity, while the crowd watched in frozen silence. Thousands stood silently during the execution, terrified that one wrong word could become their own death sentence. The execution sword reflected sunlight sharply, cold enough to end a queen's life within seconds. Young Elizabeth stared into confusion after losing her mother, unable to understand the cruelty of power. The royal nursery remained empty after Anne's death, filled only with silence and loneliness. Ghostly visions of Henry VIII and his wives haunted the palace like cursed memories. Portraits of Henry's 6 wives lined the walls, each face carrying tragedy and betrayal. Little Elizabeth sat alone beside the palace stairs, already learning how dangerous royal blood could be. She heard whispers about betrayal echoing through the corridors long before she understood their meaning. Rain crashed over the Tower of London, while Elizabeth herself became a prisoner of fear and politics. Guards escorted young Elizabeth through cold prison corridors, their armor echoing against stone walls. From behind prison bars, Elizabeth stared toward the cloudy sky, dreaming of freedom. A single candle illuminated her prison room, while shadows stretched like claws around her. Secretly, Elizabeth studied books in prison, sharpening the intelligence that would one day save her. Outside her chamber, suspicious royal guards watched every movement she made. Each night, Elizabeth prayed quietly beside a weak candle, asking heaven for strength. The giant iron prison doors slammed shut with terrifying finality. Inside the darkness, Elizabeth promised herself she would never fully trust another soul again. Years later, England suffered from riots, hunger, and religious chaos across the streets. Villages burned while frightened citizens fled through smoke and destruction. London itself drowned beneath fear, angry crowds, and endless uncertainty. Catholics and Protestants clashed violently while England tore itself apart from within. Then Elizabeth entered the throne room for her coronation, carrying both fear and destiny. Golden coronation robes shimmered around her as if she were born for the throne itself. One by one, nobles bowed before the new queen, though many secretly doubted her. The massive royal crown lowered slowly onto Elizabeth's head like the weight of an entire kingdom. Inside Westminster Abbey, candlelight transformed the coronation into something almost holy. Elizabeth sat proudly upon the throne while nobles studied her every expression carefully. Some male politicians whispered that no woman could ever rule England successfully. Elizabeth answered them only with a confident stare, sharp enough to silence doubt. Across Europe, kings sent marriage proposals hoping to control England through its queen. A Spanish ambassador arrived in luxurious fashion, carrying promises that hid dangerous ambition. Philip II of Spain appeared powerful in royal armor, though his eyes revealed cold calculation. French nobles gathered privately, discussing how marriage could shift the balance of Europe. Night after night, Elizabeth read endless marriage proposals beside candlelight. During diplomatic meetings, the Queen smiled mysteriously while revealing almost nothing. Foreign ambassadors filled the royal ballroom with tension disguised as elegant conversation. Elizabeth politely refused another proposal, protecting both her freedom and her kingdom. Her advisors pressured her constantly, warning that England needed a king beside her. Alone in the palace gardens, Elizabeth walked silently while wrestling with impossible choices. A chessboard sat before her like a symbol of the political game she mastered better than any king. During negotiation, Elizabeth's intelligent eyes revealed she was always thinking 3 moves ahead. Across Europe, powerful kings waited anxiously for the Queen's answer. Elizabeth sat surrounded by diplomats at the royal table, controlling the room without raising her voice. Then she declared England itself would be her husband, shocking every noble present. The court froze in disbelief after hearing the Queen reject marriage completely. Silence swallowed the royal court while Elizabeth's words echoed through history. Before the English flag and crown, the Queen stood stronger than any king expected. Soon, Robert Dudley entered the palace, bringing warmth into Elizabeth's lonely world. Young Dudley smiled at the Queen naturally, without fear or political masks. Beside candlelight, Elizabeth and Dudley shared private conversations hidden from the court. In the palace gardens, romantic tension quietly bloomed between them. For perhaps the first time in years, Elizabeth laughed sincerely while beside Dudley. Servants whispered secretly about the growing closeness between the Queen and her favorite courtier. At sunrise, Elizabeth and Dudley rode horses together beyond the palace walls. From the balcony, Elizabeth watched Dudley with emotions she could never fully confess. Late at night, the two met secretly while the palace slept. Candles illuminated the private chamber with dangerous romance and hidden longing. Meanwhile, Dudley's wife sat alone, isolated by sadness and royal scandal. Then came the mysterious staircase where Dudley's wife was suddenly found dead. Shocked servants discovered her body, and fear spread instantly through the palace. Rumors exploded among the nobles faster than wildfire. Citizens whispered conspiracy theories, accusing Dudley of murder for ambition and love. Elizabeth heard the terrible rumors in silence, knowing love itself had become dangerous. Desperate, Dudley tried explaining himself while the Queen listened, with heartbreak hidden behind dignity. Elizabeth's eyes filled with pain as she realized love could destroy both crown and kingdom. Inside the throne room, she chose duty over the man she truly cared for. After rejection, Dudley stood alone in darkness, abandoned by the woman he loved. Rain poured outside the palace while Elizabeth cried privately where nobody could see. Years later, Dudley wrote his final emotional letter before death. Candlelight revealed the sadness hidden within every word of his farewell. An older Elizabeth held Dudley's final letter carefully, unable to hide her grief. The envelope carried the haunting words, "His last letter." Elizabeth placed the letter beside her bed forever, refusing to let it leave her sight. Alone in darkness, the Queen remembered every lost moment with Dudley. Their memories returned like ghosts dancing through candlelight and silence. The empty palace hallway reflected the loneliness left behind by lost love. Beside the midnight fireplace, Elizabeth sat alone while the flames slowly faded. As she aged, Elizabeth applied thick white makeup before the mirror to hide time itself. Her royal makeup table overflowed with powders, pearls, and perfumes masking reality. Cracks appeared within the heavy white makeup covering the Queen's aging face. Behind expensive cosmetics, Elizabeth desperately hid the signs of growing old. Royal painters created idealized portraits, transforming the Queen into an immortal symbol. The great portrait of the Virgin Queen hung inside the palace like a false dream of perfection. Jewels covered Elizabeth's magnificent gowns while loneliness remained hidden underneath. Heavenly light surrounded the Queen publicly, making her appear almost divine. Citizens worshipped Elizabeth like a sacred ruler chosen by heaven itself. Royal propaganda spread glorious images of the Queen across England. Beneath giant royal banners, Elizabeth stood proudly before her people. Meanwhile, the English navy prepared for war against mighty Spain. Massive warships sailed into violent seas beneath storm-filled skies. Through the fog, the terrifying Spanish Armada approached England dramatically. Soon the ocean exploded into chaos as England and Spain clashed in brutal battle. Cannons roared endlessly while ships burned across the sea. English sailors celebrated wildly after surviving victory against impossible odds. Elizabeth inspired her soldiers with fearless words before battle. The soldiers raised their swords proudly for their queen and country. Across England, citizens celebrated the defeat of the Spanish Armada. Fireworks illuminated the night sky while victory transformed fear into hope. England entered a golden age beneath Elizabeth's powerful rule. William Shakespeare wrote masterpieces beside candlelight while the kingdom flourished. Elizabeth watched a Shakespeare performance proudly inside the Royal Theatre. Crowded Tudor theaters overflowed with excitement, art, and imagination. Artists painted glorious masterpieces inspired by England's cultural rise. Scholars filled grand libraries with books and endless knowledge. London grew wealthier, stronger, and more influential than ever before. Elizabeth stood proudly as England rose into global power beneath her reign. Yet behind her royal smile, secret sadness continued growing silently. After the celebrations ended, the royal dining hall became painfully empty. Night after night, Elizabeth ate dinner alone in complete silence. The Queen wandered sleepless through endless late-night hours. Beside her restless face, candlelight flickered weakly like fading life. In private, Elizabeth slowly removed her royal wig and hidden illusions. The aging Queen stared fearfully into the mirror, terrified by time. A cracked mirror reflected the emotional pain hidden beneath royal strength. Wrinkles disappeared beneath heavy makeup, though loneliness could not. The Queen wandered through silent palace corridors with nobody beside her. The giant, empty throne room symbolized the isolation surrounding absolute power. Beside the rain-covered window, Elizabeth sat silently watching the storm. Luxury surrounded the queen everywhere, yet emotionally she remained empty. Royal servants watched their queen quietly from a respectful distance. Elizabeth prayed softly for peace and strength before another sleepless night. At last, the elderly queen lay weakly upon her deathbed. Candles surrounded the royal death chamber with haunting silence. Nobles gathered quietly around the dying queen, unable to stop history. Elizabeth stared toward the ceiling while memories flooded back through her fading mind. Visions of young Elizabeth appeared like ghosts from another lifetime. The queen's tired eyes revealed exhaustion, heartbreak, and unfinished longing. Beside the bed rested the royal crown that had cost her everything. After her death, heavy silence filled the palace completely. Royal bells echoed across England, announcing the end of an era. Mourning citizens gathered outside the palace gates beneath gray skies. Black funeral banners covered London in sorrow. Elizabeth's coffin moved slowly through the streets during the grand funeral procession. Royal guards marched carefully beside the coffin in perfect silence. Inside the cathedral, candles surrounded the queen's coffin like eternal stars. A lonely crown sat abandoned in darkness without an heir. Fog covered the palace once more, as though history itself mourned.